Welcome to the Holistic Counselor Podcast, you fearfully and wonderfully made human. I'm your host, Diana, from Through the Valley Therapy and Transform Mind Consulting and Coaching. Today, I'm delighted to welcome a special guest whose work has been such an inspiration. I first connected with him through the Christian Mental Health Professionals group here in Florida and had the privilege of being a guest on his podcast, Build Your Happier Marriage, in episode 55, titled She Wanted Someone to Rescue Her. It was such an incredible experience, and I knew right away this was someone whose insights were worth sharing with a wider audience. Since then, I had the honor of inviting him to speak at a Christian mental wellness event I produced, where he served as a panelist in a rich discussion on relationships. He brought so much wisdom and heart to that event, and I'm excited to have him here with us today. Joining me is Kingsley Grant, licensed marriage and family therapist, certified relationship coach, and host of the Build Your Happier Marriage podcast. He's also a published author, and we'll be diving into his newest book, The Joyful Wife, which really caught my attention right away. Kingsley specializes in helping wives of entrepreneurial husbands better understand their partners, rekindle love, and deepen intimacy, all while maintaining a heart of peace and joy. Married since 1985, Kingsley is also a proud dad, a man of faith, an optimist, and an entrepreneur at heart. And when he's not helping couples thrive, he's singing his Grammy worthy hits in the shower. Kingsley, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to chat with you about your new book.
Diana, thank you so very much. It's my delight. It's a pleasure. I look forward to this moment, and I can't tell you how excited I am to join you here on your excellent and really award-winning podcast. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, honestly, like you inspired me by me coming on your because that was like over a year ago, right? I mean,
Yeah,
how
it has
long
been.
ago?
It has been. Yeah, it's been a good while.
Yeah, I bared my soul on that one. Oh my gosh, I
Oh yeah,
overshared. I
it's an
overshared.
episode. It's something that I believe everybody need to listen to because you truly went into some personal stuff. I think was very pertinent and very appropriate for the episodes. It was good.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I'm curious about your new book, The Joyful Wife. What inspired you to write it, especially as a man? You're very brave in this day and age to write something as a man about women. So tell me about it.
You know, Diana, I think it's a question I get asked more often than not, and which is understandable. It's understandable because I think number one, I'm not a woman, and so I was put that up front. But here's what I've known: I've worked with so many couples over the last almost 2 decades. I mean, hundreds of couples, and I know that almost 80, if not, and it's conservative speaking, are those who initiate for either coaching or counseling are the wives.
Sure.
And so they're the ones who are more invested and are more wanting to work on the relationship. The husbands, I mean, I'm one, so I know this for a person, tend to be reluctant. We tend to want to fix things, and nothing is really as serious as the wife is making out to be. And so what happened is I find that how can I help her truly while she is navigating this serious seasons in her life, in her marriage, to remain peaceful and joyful? How can I help her to not lose her sanity and really just become, the one who actually is so maybe resentful or just her, mental, emotional, physical well-being. So I figure, well, if I can help her to better understand that husband of hers, like I can speak to that very well, then I would give her a roadmap to a more happier, peaceful, and longer lasting marriage. So that's what really kind of prompted me to write this book.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, because I mean, marriage has in 20 years, I mean, you said for decades, it has changed big time,
Yeah.
right? So what's the biggest change you've noticed and how couples connect or fail to connect? And how does your book address this?
Yeah. So what I found in the last, recent years, because of the of technology and social media, really has done a lot to relationships, especially marriages. And the easy access to all these information and all this kind of stuff that's out there. And some of those are from people who may not even have been married. I find that the big change is how the technology and the busyness have crept in and as what I call the silent third parties in relationships, right? It becomes the third party. It's a
Mm-hmm.
go-to. It's a thing that's, have you ever gone out sometimes and say to dinner or to a place and you notice couples sitting down and they're eating or having finished eating and they're on their phone and they're not even
Yes.
talking, no engagement. I'm thinking like, wait a minute, So I believe that those things have really made relationships and marriages so much more different since in more recent times. And what the Joyful Wife book is, what I have them to do is tackle this disconnect, right? The disconnection that basically is going on in the marriage. And so I created a framework called the Connect Framework. And it's really about practical faith-based steps to rebuild that which is missing from the relationship, right? So
Mm-hmm.
is that providing this emotional bridge. Imagine a emotional bridge. I call it the intimacy bridge. And
Mm-hmm.
what it does, it helps them to how to do this marriage and still maintain their sanity, but also connect better with their husband. So that's what I've seen the changes, and that's what the book is addressing.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's good. So, for wives who feel like they're the only ones working on the marriage, because you just stated, right? Like 80% of what you've seen
Yeah,
are the women issue. And honestly, because I am an open book, I mean,
yeah,
I'm trying really hard to
yeah,
to have better, but I am. That's who I am, right? And my husband knows what's up. Like,
yeah.
we've been together almost 30 years. We'll be celebrating this year our 30th.
Congratulations.
So, but because we did have to go to marriage uh therapy. We did. And I'm glad and I'm grateful that he was open, but I'm the one who had to initiate it,
Yeah.
you know? So, what practical steps can they take today to spark with change without resentment? Because that's the thing. It's like I feel not that I feel, but many women say, I feel like I'm the one who puts more effort in this. And then I hear the men because I did couples therapy for a minute there and I realized that wasn't my niche at all. This is why I
Yeah.
bring people like you on because that's your niche. And in case somebody wants to work with me, nope, sorry, I'll work with you individually, but
Yes.
I will send you to Kingsley. So tell
Yeah.
me, like,
Mhm.
what steps, like practical steps, that if a person's hearing this, a
Mhm.
woman or wife, or even, this is good stuff too before marriage to learn, right?
It is.
So
Yeah.
what?
One of the things I find, and I think you started off by talking about how a wife might feel like, well, she's the one who tend to be doing all the heavy lifting and the work. And
Mhm,
I get it. I see it so often. And I empathize right up front with that wife because I know how that feels. And I know how it feels because I've heard it firsthand. I
mhm,
watched it, and I've been married, almost 4 decades, so 39 plus years. So again, as you can imagine, so I've also experienced it in my own relationship. But one of the things that I go back to, Diana, is a scripture that really, really kind of helped to put all this together. And in Proverbs 14, verse 1, it says this: a wise woman, and you can put a
mhm,
wife there, a wise wife builds her home, not house, her home. But a foolish one tears it down with her own hands. So, what I believe that for a wife, because she is such an influential and powerful part of the equation, more than she realizes, that she has the power to really frame the marriage more than anyone else can. The
mhm,
husband, of course, he has his part to play, but according to the scripture, because she's wiser. She is more sensitive. She understands relationship better. She's been wired that way. She sees things with a sixth eye, so to speak, when it comes to relationship that we guys we miss. We are oblivious so much to what's happening. You ask us what's going on in the marriage. What are you talking about? Nothing's going on. We are good,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But she said, "Are you kidding me? Are you serious?" And so, because of that, I'm thinking, why not appeal to her? Why not empower her? Why not give her the tools so she can do the job she needs, that needs to be done? Because a husband, you can, of course, he needs his part, he has his part to play. But I believe that she is more the one that needs to be equipped and empowered. And because she's a wiser one, I believe that God has made it that way. She's wise. And if she's going to build her home, then she would be the one who needs to initiate and frame what that home should look like. So I want her to know that it's not putting one more thing on her plate.
Mhm,
It's saying you have more power and influence than you give yourself credit for or know. And God has designed it that way because you can appeal to your husband in a manner where he will hear you like you've never heard it before. And that's what I set out into doing the joyful book, wife's book, is to kind of carve that out. So some practical things that I talk about, for example, her actually making moves towards him, even though things might be so busy and crazy, and she feel disconnect, right? But she has a way of really getting his attention. Like simple things, right? Simple initiating, maybe whatever it might look like. In my, a quick example with my home, my wife I might be in my office working all day, working on the side business, and just really heads down and just going for it. And I just oblivious to everything. And she would come in and she'll just say, put her hand on my shoulder and say, "Honey, can you let's go outside for 5 minutes?" But her presentation makes me know she's not here to criticize me. She's not here to nag me. She's not here to attack me. And I respond to that. Now, that hasn't always been the case. It's taken almost 4 decades to get here. So it didn't happen overnight. But I'm thinking that that approach in a practical manner, using that, I would say, respectful approach that she honors and she acknowledges what I'm doing
Mhm.
becomes a huge part of the equation. So I think that she, the wife, I'm speaking the joyful wife, is just really changing, not making things harder, but do some
Mhm.
things different.
Yeah. So I'm always thinking because I work with a lot of women that come out of abusive relationships.
Mhm.
Okay. And in the church.
Yeah.
And so this is where I'm going to ask you, how do you help wives distinguish between a marriage going through tough seasons? Because there is no perfect marriage. There is no, we're human, two human beings coming in with our own backstory, right? With our own love language, with our own communication skills, with our own stories that we picked up from the environment that raised us and stuff,
Yeah.
and sometimes spiritually not aligned,
Yeah.
right? So, how do you distinguish between a marriage going through tough seasons and one where they're experiencing genuine neglect and abuse? And how should they respond in these situations? Because sometimes when you do this is probably one of the reasons I am not a couples therapist, just because of how much I've seen in in my culture and in just what I've seen. So how do you do that?
Yeah. The first thing I would say, and this is where I think they I tweak things a bit different because sometimes, of course, as you know, this the word the wordings, like for example, abuse is thrown around quite a bit, and sometimes it's also abused, right? The word is used and overused,
Mm-hmm.
and so I look at each situation. However, when there's physical abuse, that's the first thing I want to go at. If there's any physical abuse in the relationship, I'm thinking, how can you get out and find a safe place? Because that is the first thing we want to rule on. Safety first. You must be feeling safe, and we want to then advocate for your safety. So once we have taken care of that, and I would say in that situation, maybe that person might need a different approach and need to work through that first before they even want to listen to what I'm saying about that from the joyful book, joyful
Mm.
wife's book, because I'm speaking to more all things being equal, where those things are not part of the equation, because
Okay.
that requires a different kind of approach that I think is for another book. But I think right now, if there's an abusive, if it's physical, then that's the first thing. Now, if you're experiencing disconnect or loneliness, and sometimes that can be framed as emotional abuse because a person feels like they're being emotionally abused, and the a husband is somehow leveraging maybe his power, his position, his leadership,
Mm-hmm.
and wanting that to become the thing for the marriage. And so can be an can border on the line of abuse, right? So I would say that if a wife finds herself in that situation, number one, get some help. Get
Yeah.
someone to help you navigate that and figure out what you might want to do. Having done all of that now, I would say then possibly realize that you might need to change the framework from which you're operating from. And here's why. The world would tell you immediately, get rid of him. I mean,
Mm.
he doesn't deserve you, and they will go there right away because the culture have created a narrative that you can just click the button and you can get the feedback. This is what you're supposed to do. But then God has a different approach. I believe He uses every situation for our own good. So when I hear a person comes, I would say, once we've ruled out physical and we just discuss those things,
Mm-hmm.
what might be God trying to teach you? What might be God trying to use this for in your life? Because God is ultimately trying to make us more like Christ. And so I'm thinking for that joyful wife, number one is pray first, right? I call it pause and pray, right? So if you're going to pause and pray, is pray for the husband. Because I find sometimes I ask a wife, how often have you prayed for your husband? And she
Mm.
said, pray? Are you kidding? I want to kill him, right? And I want to pray for him.
Yeah, do not pray to smite him.
Exactly. Exactly. Lightning boom, So I say no. It has to be where you're going to pause and pray. And one of the things I say, Diana, which is so critical to this conversation, is I've created this one sentence I believe that drives everything, and that is that embracing the mind of Christ
Mhm.
is the fastest and most impactful way for a wife to rekindle, to better understand her husband, number one, and rekindle love and deepen her intimacy. So the mind of Christ means that what does that look like? So it's a peaceful approach. It's a approach of humility. It's an approach of submission to God first, right? And His Word. I think that if that is in place as it's supposed to be, it's going to change her approach. She's going to probably see her husband instead of seeing him as abusing her. If again we have identified what we talked about earlier, but instead of
Yes.
seeing him that way, she's going to see him as God. You might want me to help him become something he's not yet, to love him in spite of, to show him what it means to be fully submissive to God first and His Word, and walk out that life before Him, as an
Mm.
example. Now, that's not easy, it's hard, but I believe sometimes God may want to use that for both the husband, but because I'm speaking to the wife, for her, so she can maintain a heart of peace and joy.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, talking about the neglect and abuse part of it, I know that there is, I want to say is it the Minnesota cycle that we had to learn in domestic violence class, but they made a Christian one now. And I'll put
Mm.
it in the show notes because to me, I think it does show. Yeah, I guess it is because the difference of like what I see as a therapist. And you're right, the word abuse is thrown. I mean, it's like so many things are thrown. Narcissism.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
there
yeah.
it's just a cultural
Yeah.
TikTok mentality, and we have to stop. And that's where I like where you said, take a step back and pray and take every thought captive to Christ. Right. And the
Amen.
only way you can do that is to open up the word of God. But you have to make sure you're safe first, because if
Yeah.
you're dysregulated and you're not in a safe place, like you have to find the resources, because I've seen things like shift, and it's rare, but I have seen men get abused, like it's like undercover, and so I get it, I get that. And that's why if you're listening and you're in a relationship, you have to understand who you are and your identity in Christ first, period. Right, Kingsley? I mean,
100%.
and to be in a healthy relationship, because Kingsley and I are both Christian counselors, even though we might take people that are not believers because of our license and our ethics and we know what to do. It's just understanding your identity is probably one of the most important things in every relationship, because the enemy
Mhm.
wants to steal, kill, and destroy
Mhm.
every relationship, especially the one within yourself.
Mhm.
Right?
100%. I think that you're spot on. I think you've just nailed that piece right there, Diana, so well, because we have to always understand that we have an adversary and his work. The Bible says he roams around like a lion, seeking those he may devour. So we have to be sensitive to the fact that what if God is trying to do something here in our lives, and not just accept everything that comes across as if it's from the devil, or it's an evil thing. No, God may be the one who is setting that up because he wants us to become more like his son, and
Mm-hmm.
whatever it takes. So when I tell this wife, I said, listen, because you hold the key, you hold a powerful position in this marriage beyond what you know. I want to appeal to you because you're more sensitive to this than your husband is. And I know from firsthand, I'm a husband, and I know that my wife is more sensitive to those things than I am, because she'll call things out on me that I may be oblivious of. I didn't even see it. And she would say, honey, listen. And I'm thinking, you're right. I mean, it took me a while to admit that she's right, but I'll come around to that. And that's why I've been married, I think, almost 40 years now, because I recognize that God has given her as a gift to me. And that's why I think in the very Genesis, God said, I create for you and I make you a husband, a helpmeet, because she has a powerful position to play. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to elevate her to that position so she can see her role, not like the world have said about her, but through the lens of scripture and from a godly perspective.
Yeah. Does your book acknowledge husbands too? Like if a man wants to read this book to learn more on how to be a better husband, can this book help them?
Well, I would say yes and no because he'll understand what his wife is coming from and what she's trying to do. And so if he reads this book, he recognizes her attempt is truly to connect with his heart. So
Mm-hmm.
what I'm doing here as a husband who know what a husband needs because I'm a man, a husband, I'm an entrepreneur. I know what the needs we have. So if he reads this book, he'll see what she is attempting to do. And in recognizing that, we've been more able to respond. But primarily, I'm trying to get her because she is a wise one, as the Bible says, who is building her home. And so I want her to have as much as possible to better understand him. Because when she better understands him,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a game changer. Because
Yeah.
she now knows that some things he's doing that she may have framed at one time as wrong, as bad, as evil, it may not be that way. And she can take a step back and realize, wait a minute, this man loves us. He wants the best for us as a family. He's doing everything in his power to provide and to protect. And she may not see that. She may see it as because she's not getting what she wants right away. But if she can step back sometimes. So I'm trying to help her to have a lens to see him. Because when she better understands him, it's easy for her to rekindle love and deepen her intimacy.
Okay. Yeah. So if somebody is wanting to work with you, Kingsley, because I mean, besides the book, right, and besides the Bible, because we're trained in so much more, what other modalities do you utilize in couples therapy?
Yeah. So my go-to is CBT, right? So it's cognitive behavioral therapy
Hmm.
and solution focus brief therapy. So I tie those together. Now, of course, being very eclectic, we would use all kinds of based upon the situation, we'll pull from different sources, but that's my main go-to. And the reason why I believe that people can get quicker results or should get quicker results than I believe that what has been happening, unfortunately in the therapeutic world. People have come out and they have spent years and years. I'm thinking, I'm not that kind of therapy, so I'm not knocking that. There's a place for deep, deep, deep work. I get it. I'm not in any way trying to compare. But my work to people is how can I get you from point A to point B as quick as possible and then empower you to then create new habits and so on, new thoughts, new thinking, new paradigms, so you can have a better marriage. So for me, people who come to me who are not Christians, for example, of course, my approach is going to be more cognitive and helping them to see things a different way and frame things. I'm good at helping people to frame things differently. That's one of my superpower because if they can have a different framing of something, but
Okay.
what changes, when something changes, it changes, right? So if nothing changes, nothing changes. So if I can change your framework through which they see their marriage, your relationship, then they have a better chance of changing the outcome. So that's my typical approach, what I use with couples for the most part.
Wow. Okay. Do you utilize any resources or like assignments like or deliverables or whatever, for them during the week or 2 weeks? I mean, what is it that you utilize? I know CBT, but do you have them, like say I am coming to you,
Yeah.
right? And I called you up and I'm saying, all right, and now you're meeting with me and my husband for the first time. What do you do?
Yeah. So that's a good question. And so I think here's where I think I'm a bit a contrarian to some for most things that's out there because I believe people's lives are so busy, right? They're so busy in their lives. And
Mm-hmm.
one last thing they want to is one more thing to do. So, right, one more thing to do. And most times that I find in my years, most couples will not do that one more thing. So I had to join them where they're at and find out what can I now help them with within what they've given to me to work with. How
Mm-hmm.
can I find one thing? Because anything more than that is not going to happen. How can I find one thing to work on between sessions? So in our conversation, we identify what's the one thing that can move them at least very, very slightly up a grade. So, for example, say we do a scaling and they're like at a five or so. I said, what's the one thing? And I'm not going to give them that. They have to come up with that. So, in our conversation, I will say, what's the one thing that can move you ever so slightly in the direction you want to go? And when they identify that, that's their homework. Because if I
Mm-hmm.
give them something to do, again, I'm not knocking what's out there, resources. The chance is they're not going to do that. I've proven that over the years. Very, very few are going to do that. However, if they say we could go on a date this week, well, go on a date, and here's what you may want to do on your date. That's an assignment. That is much more effective in my mind than if I
Mhm.
give them something else as a resource that may not um, resonate with them where they are in their journey. So we co-create it in a session, and then they work on that outside a session.
Wow, wonderful. So, do you work with blended families and do you do family therapy too, or just couples?
Well, I do family, but I have really cut back on that because I do everything virtual. When I used
Mm-hmm.
to have an office, I found it to be much more effective because I have everyone in the room and I can be able to manage that a whole lot better. I've
Okay.
attempted to do it virtually, and I've seen the shortcomings of that, right?
Yeah, I
But
can imagine.
yeah, it is. But I can do couples. I do couples, my couples virtually because I mean it's just two people. When you
Okay.
add another layer or two or three, then that
Mhm.
becomes to me it becomes it's kind of undermined the power of what can happen in that session. So yes, when I work with couples or the blended couples, I work with them all the time. Is just give them the idea that hey, what works for your couples that are not blended may not work for you. How can we create what works for you? And let's go with that.
Okay, good to know. And so you work online only now, but
Yeah,
you're also coaching, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
you have there. Okay, so we need to let the audience know exactly what that means because
yeah,
I'm just starting to dive into that, and I understand. But I would like to, since
yeah.
you've been doing it a lot longer, and I'm learning from you, Mister Wise Man,
The
Kingsley.
white who are the woman's a white, so you're the wise person here.
I love that. Did you hear that, everybody? If you're a woman listening to this,
Exactly. That's right.
Kingsley, no. Can you explain to the audience the difference between the counseling and then the coaching part of you?
Yeah. So I want to just mention here's on a quick distinction, right? Counseling is more, it works on problem solving. So it tends to look back to solve a problem. Coaching is forward looking, it's more
Mhm.
solution focused, it's getting a solution. So it's forward looking, it's not trying to go back to figure out what has happened. It's more, how can we take you from where you are to where you want to go? That's a simple idea of coaching. Why they're
Mhm.
so distinct separately? Because in counseling, I need to look at everything that presented or the contributing factors, which could require you to look back in some historic piece of your life that may be a contributing factor. The only thing I do differently in my counseling is I don't need all the information unless it's relevant to where you are right now. So to me, it's just a waste of time if I'm going to get all your history if it's not affecting you right now. So I look for what's affecting you right now and look for all the contributing factors, and we can counsel on that. We can reframe things, create new narrative, new script, all that. We'll do that for counseling. For coaching now, it's more like okay, we identify your goals, your future, where you want to get to, and we work backwards. So we see how can we get you to where you are. So we reverse engineer. That's what coaching does. Whereas
Mhm.
the backward, you had to first set the North Star, and then we create how to get there, and we take it piece by piece to get you there. That's the difference between the coaching and counseling.
Okay. And so in counseling, are you licensed just in Florida? Because that's then only where you can do counseling, correct? Or are you
Right.
licensed in other states?
So I'm licensed in Florida and South Carolina.
Okay. Nice
Yeah.
to know. And so you do couples therapy in Florida and South Carolina.
Yeah, and
But
individual as well. Yeah.
oh, an individual as well.
Yeah, I do a lot.
Ah.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I can majority of my sessions per day in my daily counseling is
Mhm.
individuals because couples
Okay.
is I love couples and I always will do that. It's a unique thing and sometimes
Mhm.
depends on their situation because I don't do couples with insurance, right? So because
Mhm.
I do individual, so I want to make sure that I mention that because I think people might be listening to us and say, "Oh, okay, can you then here work with us?" And so, well, yeah, I can, but here are the stipulations.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Okay. And then coaching though,
Yeah.
it's worldwide.
Yeah, so I've coached people internationally. Wherever they are, I can coach them in their relationships. Yes.
Okay. And what do you usually see in the coaching part of it? Is it they come in and say, all right, I want to get married, or I want to find a wife, or I want to, I
Right.
don't know, give me an example.
Yeah, yeah. So in coaching in relationships, so if it's a couple, most likely they're pretty functional. They're pretty healthy in their
Mm,
relationship.
okay.
And what they want to do is, for example, if they're building a business within their marriage and they want to know how to
Um,
coaching around that idea, they may want to be able to relocate and they want some coaching around that idea. So it's more functional, high functional thing that they want to do. And so that's where more couples kind of thing. Individually, they might want to then, of course, business wise, it could be career change, it could be
mhm.
pivoting, all that stuff. That's a more individual track that tends to happen in coaching.
Okay, that's wonderful. All right, so since time is shortening for us and we both have to go to work after this, I mean, this is sort of work. It's fun
Yeah.
work. This is fun work for me.
Oh,
I
it
wish I
is.
could do this forever. I
Time
love
will
this.
come that you will become, you'll have a chance. I mean, the way you're going, I think that this could be really, really get there. It could get
Oh,
there.
see, I love Kingsley. Thank you, man. All right. You've been married for 40 years, like
Yes.
40 years, man. So let me see. That was 80s, right? In the 80s,
1985.
1985. I was 1995.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
yeah. So tell me though, like what's one unexpected or even funny lesson you've learned along the way? And how do you view that, that love and connection with your wife?
Yeah. So, what have I would say the fun part is that my wife, having through the different years of the different stages of life, I realized that the person that I once knew in her first stage of her life is not necessarily the same person today. And so I have a lot of fun sometimes because she'll ask me over and over questions like, do you love me? Do you love me? Right? She'll say that and stuff. I said, I don't say to her, if when I don't love you, I'll tell you. So don't ask me. I don't say that to her, right? I'll just say to her, I'll just shake my head and say no. So we had this funny inside joke, and people don't understand, they'll get the wrong impression. So she
Mm,
may ask me in a public setting because she want to say, oh, well, he now say no in a public setting. But I'll just shake my head and say no, right? And so she like just laugh because just laugh because it's a funny thing for us because she knows that that's a way to kind of get my attention. And so we have this game we play around that sometimes. And I will say to her sometimes also, honey, when last have you told me how what I'm doing? Because my love language, of course, is words of affirmation. And she doesn't get that too much because hers is physical touch. And so what have you give to people what you really want more of? I
right.
said to her, when was the last time, I'm feeling kind of rusty here in the area of hearing from you that this was a great job. I need to hear I don't have my ego scratch, right? So we just play along with that and we just don't get offended because some people say, oh, I don't get my love language. No, no. I find it to be a growing process and I think that it's going to be that way until we die because
Mm,
we're learning each other every stage of life. And I think we have fun with these things because to me it just brings energy and fuel to the relationship. So she will keep on asking me and I'll shake my head and she will say one day your head's gonna drop off your I say, well, we'll see until that time because I know I'm exercising my neck. So I'll say, so we
yeah,
have fun around that. So that's what I've gotten to know. Now I couldn't have done this early on in my marriage because she
right.
would get offended and I'll probably get offended myself too. So we have kind of grown into that kind of playful gesture in our relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it is a choice. Like every day I wake up choosing to work on my relationship, like, and to learn about myself first too. Because this is what happens. We come in with so many expectations in any relationship. I don't care if it's friendship or with you being a parent or with your own parents or your caregivers. Because I can't assume that everybody had a mom and a dad, and that raised them, but it is understanding you first. And then I want to explain what he's talking about with the love language real quick, because somebody might be like, what is he talking about? And it's the five love languages of Gary Chapman wrote this book. My love language is physical touch and quality time, and they're even.
Oh, wow.
So I need to just sit there and be hugged for 1 hour straight. And
Mhm.
my husband is not like that. He's like, am I done yet? Am I done?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
But it
Let's get on
is.
the time.
Yeah, exactly. I got work to do. I
Oh,
got
yeah.
work to do, D.
Yeah.
And so it's just understanding who you are, what you need. So the five love languages, and you know what else helped me a lot in my marriage too, that a counselor suggested to do is the personality assessment,
Okay. Uh-huh.
because then I got to figure out my own personality, my strengths, my weaknesses, and
Yeah.
then him as well. And then I understood, like, oh, this is why he does this. It's not because he's being a jerk. This is just how he was made in a way. And we have to like figure out what is an excuse and what's not, and how hard to work on our relationships no matter
Yeah.
what they are,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
because we're human beings. We all fall short of the glory. And this is why we need Jesus.
100%. 100%,
So
Yeah.
Kingsley, where can the listener or viewer, because this will be on YouTube, find
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, so any platform at Kingsley Grant. So any platform you go to at Kingsley Grant, you'll find me. And so if you want to know and when the book is coming out very soon, so whenever this is up, might be out by the time you see this.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing that I wanted to, if I can just mention this, Diana, because
Sure.
you mentioned something very interesting just now about the love languages and personality profiles. I find that people have those things, but yet they don't know how to get from where they are to where they want to go, right? So that's why
Mm-hmm.
one things I do about in the book, I have two major frameworks, so the connect framework and then what I call the intimacy bridge. And the intimacy bridge is simply saying, if you are at a place right now in your relationship and you want to get to the other place, yes, you may know your personality. Yes, you may know your love language, but it's really still not working. Having all those knowledge is still not getting you what you want. So
Mm-hmm.
you want a transformation. You want something that is really transforming that can truly make you feel loved and attended to and cared for and heard and seen, all those different things. And so what happened is I just say, there's three things I say is so important, right? So I call it the three E's. So it's embrace. So they're going to embrace number one, like you said just now, know who you are, embrace where you are, embrace your relationship, know the state of your relationship, know your husband, know yourself, right? So you're going to embrace that. Then the second piece is once you learn how to express your emotions, express what you're feeling, learn how to communicate effectively and empathically, because not just effective but also with empathy. So you have to be able to express yourself, and I teach that also in the book. And the last part is embody it. So embody simply means live it out on a daily basis, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how do you live this out on a daily basis? So those three I call the intimacy bridge to get you from knowing yourself, like you said, so well, your personality, your love languages, knowing all of that, but then use these three different stages to get you to where you want the transformation to happen.
Love that. I can't wait to read this book. Where am I going to find this book?
So if they just go to anywhere, just follow me on social media at Kingsley Grant, because I'll
Okay.
make a big announcement of the
Okay.
book and where to get it and how to get it. So if they follow me, they truly will be able to get their hands on it, because it'll be on Amazon, available both in print and ebook.
Are you going to have a what is it called? A book opening or whatever like people have like at a place anywhere or
But
what?
not yet, not yet. The book will come out, and I know. It's just a time and so on. I want to get it in the hands of wives right away, and so I feel like I want to get this out, and then yes, I can do have a later time. I'd have this book tour possibly, but
Mhm.
I'm excited about the future of what God has in mind for this joyful wife book.
Yeah. See, my producer mind is starting to go, man, we should talk to Markin because Markin had a pretty cool thing. And I could see you doing that, Kingsley, and we need to figure it out. And then we can all come together. And I just
Yeah,
want to hug everybody anyway, because physical touch and
yeah,
quality
yeah.
time with you guys. But anyway.
And you're good at that, because I've been to your events, and you do a fantastic job. So that's your gift,
Thanks.
that's your specialty.
Oh, thanks,
Yeah.
Kingsley. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, everybody. Oh, any word of encouragement or a Bible verse that you would just want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, one of my favorite is Psalm 127, verse 1.
Mm.
Unless the Lord builds a house, they labor in vain, those who build it.
Mm.
God must be a part of that, because if he's not involved, your home will not be built the way it ought to be. So that's my word.
Yeah.
And then Galatians 6, verse 9 says, um, do not give up. Do not give up. It may tarry, but persevere to the end, because it's those who persevere will actually have the things they're looking for. That's a loose translation of it, but that's what it means in that text.
Yeah, I love it. Yep. So, on that note, listener, remember to trust in the Lord, guard your heart, and renew your mind. Bye. And now for the disclaimer to make sure you understand that you are responsible for you. The content provided on the Holistic Counselor podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical or mental condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The views expressed on this podcast are my personal opinions and do not represent the views of any professional organizations with which I am affiliated. Call your doctor, 911, or 988 immediately if you have a medical emergency. The Holistic Counselor podcast does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the podcast. Reliance on any information provided by the Holistic Counselor podcast, guests appearing on the podcast at the invitation of the Holistic Counselor podcast, or other listeners to the podcast is solely at your own risk. Confidentiality notice. If you engage with the Holistic Counselor podcast by commenting or posting and are a client, please be aware that you may be revealing information that could compromise your confidentiality. Please remember that disclosing your identity or personal details can be linked to your clinical material. As a therapist, I am bound by confidentiality and will not respond to any disclosures of this type on this podcast. I am committed to upholding the ethics and confidentiality of the therapeutic relationship, which extends to all forms of communication in accordance with the laws and professional guidelines that govern mental health professionals. I want you to know that your privacy is of utmost importance, and you are responsible for protecting it when interacting on this platform or any other public forum. Thank you.